Toward the end of the superhero movie Thor Ragnarok, the Norse god Thor finds himself with a seemingly impossible choice. His overriding purpose over the course of the story has been to defeat his power hungry sister Hela, who has ambitions of conquering not only their father's realm of Asgard, but the rest of the universe. But as Thor engages Hela in a climatic battle, he comes to the realization that his goal of defeating her is at odds with his hope of saving Asgard from him. Only by initiating Ragnarok and allowing his home to burn can Thor actually overthrow Hela. And in the story of Noah and the flood, God faced a similar dilemma. God's purpose for creation is a peaceful, loving, and good world. But people keep messing it up. The first humans transgressed the boundaries God established for what they could consume of creation. Their son introduced violence to the world, and such violence became normal not only among people, but among wild beasts. Looking at creation, God found goodness increasingly the exception and evil the rule. God concluded that in order to have a peaceful, loving, and good world, the creation needed to be washed clean and restarted. Just as Thor decided that his goal of victory was worth burning his home world, God decided that to continue the purpose of creation, all humans and animals, except for one ark's worth, must be drowned. But after everyone has left the ark, God declares that the flood was, if not a mistake, at least something never to be repeated. Today's reading from Genesis is the covenant God makes with Noah on behalf of all humankind and animals. And unlike most covenants, where each party promises to do something, this covenant is unilateral. God makes the promise to all creation without requiring us to do anything. No matter what creation does or doesn't do, God will never again destroy the world with a flood. The sign of this unilateral covenant is the rainbow, which most commonly appears after the passing of a storm, providing visible reassurance that the storm is not part of another world-destroying flood. But it's worth noting that Genesis calls it God's bow in the clouds, because many ancient gods and goddesses were seen as archers, firing arrows from the heavens to the earth that would cause plague or famine or war. And so to see a rainbow is to see a sign that God has set aside the bow, that God's world-destroying arrows are not leaving the quiver. And for God to make this covenant signifies that God will no longer attempt to keep the world peaceful, loving, and good by wiping out the people and animals, even when they make the creation violent, hateful, and evil. God's love for us, even when we are disobedient and destructive, will keep God from killing us in pursuit of a perfect creation, even though God very much has the power to do that. The rainbow is instead a sign that God is willing to have God's heart broken. God would rather feel the pain of watching us damage creation and one another than destroy us again through divine action. It's the same choice that parents make when instead of treating their kids as prisoners, they let their children go out and make mistakes and maybe get hurt or hurt others. But God knows the same thing that those parents do, that it's not certain that humans will succumb to evil. Doing evil rather than good is a choice, not something that happens inevitably. Because we are made in God's image, we can make the same choice that God did in the covenant to allow ourselves to be hurt rather than using our power to hurt someone or something else in creation. It takes a godlike act of love to decide to sacrifice a purpose of ours when it becomes apparent that the only way to accomplish that goal is through harming someone. But God knows that we can make that choice. But knowing how difficult such love is, God sent a line of prophets to guide the people of Israel, trying to steer them away from repeating the evil behaviors that prompted the flood. That line culminated in Jesus, the beloved Son of God, who by his life and death demonstrated to us most clearly how to choose love over our own goals. But because Jesus was both God and human, there was the possibility that Jesus might have chosen poorly. Satan wouldn't have bothered taking the time to tempt Jesus if there was no way that he might have been persuaded to pursue his messianic goals to the detriment of those who ignored or harmed him. Or Jesus could have chosen to become like a wild beast, staying in the wilderness, rather than having his heart broken by an indifferent and hostile people. Happily, Jesus did not succumb to such temptations. In the end, he chose to take up his cross rather than summoning legions of angels to defend his life. And when we have power over others, the challenge for us is whether or not we can make the same choice that Jesus made, the same choice that God made after the flood. Do we choose not to pursue our goals when doing so will harm our neighbors? Do we choose to let our hearts be broken by those we love but cannot control? Do we choose to allow others to hurt us when the alternative is for us to hurt others? And we face choices like this fairly often. To offer a concrete example, it's no sin to be gay or transgender. But even if you know such folks and believe that they are sinful, you have the choice to let them break your heart rather than hurting them by trying to control what they feel and who they love. And because we are made in the image of God, we can choose the good. We can decide that the personal goal of becoming a millionaire is less important than the people we would lie to and exploit to accumulate that money. We can decide that our national purpose of bearing arms is not as important as many thousands of lives, and make a unilateral covenant to set aside the gun as God set aside the bow. In the face of a dangerously changing climate, the whole world can decide that the survival of all is more important than the wealth and supremacy of a few. God's covenant with the world still holds. If we are destroyed, it's not because God is fed up with our propensity for choosing the wrong thing, but because we have chosen destruction over life. So will we take up the challenge of the rainbow and choose what is right, even when it hurts us or keeps us from our goals?